Hi, everyone, and welcome to Her Story by Her Bible. This is a podcast exploring the intersection of womanhood and the Bible. And so I'm excited to have Miss Tara Sun with me today. And this is not our first conversation, but I hope it'll be fun and encouraging to you as you listen and hear what God has to say to you. And I appreciate Tara's love for God's Word, and that's what we're all about, is the audio Bible in women's voices. And so I'd love to just kind of dive right in with Tara. We were talking about being moms of sons, and I have 4 sons. She has 2 sons. But first off, I just wanted to welcome you, Tara, to the show.
Well, thank you for having me again. I am super excited to be here and love being reminded that you have a bunch of boys. I'm in good company already. So,
Yes. Yes, I loved being a mom of boys. And of course, now they're young men. And there were lots of adventures, and they were all born close together.
that's so fun. I honestly, and of course, I would be so happy with if the Lord blessed us with a girl. I'd be surprised, but I'd be so happy. But at the same time, I think someone asked me the other day, they're like, "Well, are you going to keep trying until you have a girl?" And you know what? I said, "Of course I'd be happy with one, but I'm so happy with the two crazy wonderful little boys that we have, and if I have a bunch more boys, then so be it. It's so fun." It really
Hmm.
is.
Yes, yes. And the high school years were really fun too, when they get involved in the things that they enjoy,
Oh yeah,
whether it's
yeah.
sports or music. And one of my sons worked at McDonald's, and he loved that. And
I love it. Yeah.
yeah, he used to get compliments on his Egg McMuffins.
Look at that. That's the best.
Yes. So Tara has written a new book called Overbooked and Overwhelmed, and I do remember feeling that way myself. And so I'd love to just hear more about that and what was kind of the heart behind why you felt the need to write this, and what did you learn from the Lord?
Yeah, absolutely. So this book came out of honestly the first book that I released was called Surrender Your Story, and I had released that in the throes of postpartum with my first son, navigating how to be a mother, and not just being a mother, but a wife and working and just the normal things, keeping up on laundry and making dinner
Hmm.
and serving at your church and just like the fullness of life. And I use that word a lot in the book because life is full and not even necessarily of like bad things, but a lot of like very good and right responsibilities. And in the face of those, I found myself so consumed by achieving and overbooking myself and just wanting to accomplish because I felt like I had to do all the things to make sure I was successful and to keep up with the life that God had given me. But in that process, Jenny, I actually started to lose God in the shuffle. And that sounds crazy, right? Because I was trying to live my life for the Lord, and yet his priority just started to fall to the wayside. And so I wrote this book because I came out of a season of extreme burnout, but not just like physical and not just from ministry or work, but like burnout in my soul, where I
Hmm.
realized like I have done so much that I have honestly run so far away from God and forgotten the heart of it. So this book is really just talking about like how do we keep up with God? That's the subtitle. How do we keep up with God when we're just trying to make sure we are good wives, are good mothers, are good students, are good workers, are good ministry leaders, like whatever that looks like. And how do we stay present with God when we are so overwhelmed and not just by our responsibilities, but I think it's even really poignant right now with when we're overwhelmed by the world and what's going
Hmm.
on in politics and in our nation, but also across the world. So, like, how do we cut through that noise and how do we determine what distractions need to be put in their places to keep God central? And so that's really the heart of the book. And we talk a lot about that. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned about God through this process and about writing the book is just how faithful he is. And there's a chapter in the book that talks about how it is really hard for us to remember the faithfulness of God and the fact that he is steadfast, ever present, always keeps his promises. And I've encountered so much shame in this journey of like, oh, I've messed up. Like I haven't kept Jesus first. I haven't put him in the right place in my life. And then the enemy uses shame to remind me of that. But then I have to be reminded, and the greater truth is that God is faithful. He is always there for me. He does not meet me with condemnation. He's actually, just like the prodigal son, welcoming me back. And so I just think remembering that in your busiest, most overwhelmed seasons, just remembering the faithfulness of God. And no matter how far you stray, no matter how many times you maybe mess up your priorities, that He's always constant. And that's really stuck with me.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing I noticed is that the discussion about fear of missing out
Yeah.
and saying yes too much. And I'd love to hear how you coped with that in particular.
Yeah, that is a chapter in the book where we talk about so much of why we become overbooked and overwhelmed by life is because we don't know how to say no. Like as Christians, I think we assume it's this cuss word. We think, oh, I can never say no because my life is supposed to serve other people. My life is supposed to serve the Lord. And so we just are these yes men, yes women, where we just keep going. And I know that boundaries is a really hot button topic. You know, you hear it all the time. There's books on it, even in Christian circles. But what I learned about this is when I say too many yeses to something, I'm also giving a no to something. So if I'm saying yes to a trip away from my boys, I'm giving that yes to that, but I'm also giving a no to other things at home. And I'm not saying that's bad because there is seasons where you really need to listen to the Lord in wisdom and discernment of what He wants you to do. But if we are constantly pouring out a yes and not considering the no's, I think that is a really good reminder for us to also check where are my priorities. Because there was a season where I was saying yes to so many things. And then I didn't realize the repercussions it was having. So maybe yes to, piling up my schedule through. And then I realized, oh, well, I'm exhausted and burnt out. Or I didn't really give my kids as much attention this week as I really wanted to. Or I said too many yeses that I didn't even open my Bible this month. Like all of these cause and effects, right? And so in this chapter in Overbooked and Overwhelmed, we talk about like, what does it look like to have FOMO for the things of God? Like looking at our lives and our calendars and thinking, okay, I don't want to miss out on what you have for me. So help me rearrange my schedule in the way that would give you the most glory in your life. And so I think to the woman listening to this thinking that like, I can't possibly say no to things, I would just encourage you to look at like, it's this great exchange that God has for us, right? So while you may, in a season, may have to say no to traveling or say no to that job or no to hosting people over at your home for a season, like look at the trade-off, look at the beauty that God has on the other side of that. And also, if you feel like you're a little confused as to what does God want me to say yes to, what does God want me to say no to, the simplest of prayers, like we see in the book of James, is like, Lord, give me wisdom. Just give me wisdom today to know how to make those decisions that honor you in discernment. And that's been really key for me because a lot of times I'm like, Lord, I don't know. I could say yes to this, but do you want me to? Because we have the ability and the free will to do so much, but that doesn't mean we should, right? It's just consulting that with the Lord every day, weekly, monthly,
Yeah, and especially when we get stressed out. I even had recently, a couple weeks ago, I was feeling so stressed out and I made a list of everything that was on my mind and bugging me. And there were 19 things. And I thought, okay, no wonder I'm stressed out. And we had weddings 2 weekends in a row in the state of Ohio. And we live in Orlando, Florida, so we're going back and forth.
Wow.
And the weddings were great and fun, but it's also, just more, you're not relaxing over the weekend. And just going back to being a mom, I remember having very little time in the Word. And that's part of my passion for her Bible and providing the audio, because I didn't have that when when my kids were your age. And so I could, I had to sit down and read, which I love doing, but it was very difficult to find time, again, because of exactly what you're saying, because I wanted to say yes to things or even my sons, but it was draining me and I wasn't taking care of myself enough. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I'm just remembering this detail as well, is that there, like you mentioned FOMO, right? We all have this this fear of like, if I say no to something, that I'm either going to miss out on this opportunity for growth or this opportunity for a raise or progress in this or that, or I'm going to miss out on being noticed. Like there's a lot of these core fears that we have about it. But something that's just changed my life when it comes to this is knowing, like, the more that I know God in his word and through time spent with him, the more I'm secure in who I am and what I am called to do. Because although we're all as believers called to do some of the same things, how that's lived out practically, right, in your vocation and your day-to-day life and in your four walls is going to look different for all of us. And so the more I know just who God has made me to be, and then the season of life that God has given me, the people that God has given me, like that helps me to have less FOMO, because I know that I am exactly where God has me and I can be present in that. I mean, we talk a ton about that in the book, and we even talk about Nehemiah, how Nehemiah had one of the greatest jobs of rebuilding the walls, right? And he had so much opposition. He had so many people telling him to do this, to do that, to stop working. A lot of opposition. But Nehemiah kept saying, I have a really good, great, worthy job from the Lord to do. I'm not going to be distracted. Like, I know what I'm called to do. And so while he may from the outside looking in have been, missing out on certain things, or people may have laughed at his decisions because he looked like a fool to some people, he knew who he was. He was rooted in the call of God in his life, and that helped him to fulfill something great. And that just reminds me of, like, when I feel that way, I'm like, you know what? No, like, I want to be exactly where God has me. And that starts with me looking in the word and looking at the Lord.
Yeah, and I love his story too, and how his vision rallied the people too.
Yeah.
And he didn't do it on his own, and they all participated. And there's
Right.
one group of sisters and daughters that helped rebuild the wall too. And so one of the things I love to ask is about women in the Bible. And
Yeah.
so what are some women, or a woman that has encouraged you in her story? And I was trying to think who struggled like this with being overbooked and overwhelmed and maybe burnout.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, okay, there's a whole chapter that we focus in on the story of Mary and Martha. We focus in on the story, everyone's favorite story, right? Of these two women going to host Jesus, the King of Kings, a dear friend, and the disciples. We also noticed that. So it wasn't just Jesus, it was like they were getting ready for a party, right? And so this chapter focuses a lot on just like fleshing out the story and not just reading it like a lot of us do at the surface, but really looking at it. And so I look at this story and I see two different women that neither one of them, I'm not going to demonize Martha. I'm not going to do that because I relate to Martha so much. And and like we see in the story that she was overbooked and overwhelmed. She had good intentions, though, just like many of us, right? Where she's like, I want to offer a beautiful place, a comfortable place, an incredible environment for Jesus, someone that I really care about, right? And then Mary, she wanted to do the same thing. And yet Mary just had more of her priorities straight, right? But we see Martha, again, out of a good heart, wanting to be a hospitable environment for Jesus. But we just see, and like Jesus calls her out gently and lovingly, he says, you're anxious about too many things. Mary, on the other hand, she's found what will never be taken away from her. And so we see two women that react to this environment differently. But Jesus's message of just saying, you know what, like when you actually just sit in the presence of Jesus and you remember that eternity is the goal, and becoming more like Jesus and helping other people become more like Jesus is the goal, that actually will help us to be better homemakers, better wives, better ministry leaders, better workers, students. And that's what I have seen in this story as I studied it really hard for this book, is that Jesus was saying, out of the overflow of you putting me first, that will ease your anxiety, that'll ease your overwhelm and help you to navigate it better. And that's just really challenging for me, and have not perfected it, and could tell you a million ways that I've already been more like Martha this week. But it just reminds me of only one thing is necessary, and that one thing will overflow into everything else if we allow the Lord to do that in our lives.
I love that, because I relate to Martha too. And when you think about, she had the most important guest at her house. And,
Yeah.
And I love how they showed it or displayed it in The Chosen, and that she asked Jesus for help. Like, would you tell my sister to help me? In front of everybody, because she was so overwhelmed. And
You get to that point, right? Where you're like, I
Yeah.
don't care who hears this, how I
Yeah,
come
right.
across. You're just at your end, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And you want things to go the way they normally do so that that you're pleasing everyone. And you
Yeah.
talked about pleasing people too. And
Yeah.
we all struggle with that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a fun story to consider and also and to relate to because
Mm-hmm.
we need to be Mary,
Yeah.
but we get driven to be Martha.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I feel that often. It's a
Yeah.
constant battle, even though my
It
kids are
is.
out of the house now. Is sometimes it's easier to dive onto the computer and do work instead of spend time in the Word. And
Right.
so that's always, it's always a battle,
Yeah.
unfortunately. One thing I wanted to ask is about just kind of a practical application.
Mm-hmm.
Like give us a scenario where you said no recently and how you handled that.
Yeah. So actually, very recently, I had a trip planned for something for work, and it was all ready to go. And we actually had, and it was the Lord's providence and timing that we get to see now, but in the middle of it, it was hard to say no. But I actually ended up canceling that trip and pivoting and doing a little bit of it from home, just due to some postpartum struggles, some things in our life going on, just with the travel and also trying to manage, two little boys at home. And it was one of those that my husband and I just prayed hard about it for a week. And it was a hard decision, right? The no's don't always come easy. Sometimes you know that the Lord is calling you to say a no, but it doesn't necessarily maybe feel so peaceful, right? I mean, we know that the Lord gives us peace that passes all understanding, but I didn't understand it, right? I'm like, Lord, I don't really know why there's a no here. And so maybe that just goes to show that sometimes the Lord leads us places that feels uncomfortable, but just trusting him in that. But actually, after saying that no, and pivoting, still felt a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit of a bummer, right, to be able
Yeah.
to say no to that. But we actually had some big family things happen, and my husband and I look back at this now and we're like, Lord, if we would have gone, we wouldn't have been around to be there for our family, to get to be present, and in a lot of honestly devastating ways that our family has actually walked through the last couple of weeks. And we see now that the Lord's hand was on that. And again, sometimes we don't always see the fruit of that, but I just am praising the Lord for how he closed that door, but he also opened the door for us to be right where we are, and to be the hands and feet of Jesus for the people that are hurting in our lives. And I don't regret a thing now. I'm so grateful to the Lord that he gave us that time.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the most important thing is being present
Yeah.
and in special relationships. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and another practical question I had is like, how would you describe a typical day where you balance everything you have going on?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm currently in a season where it's actually a lot lighter as far as responsibilities and work and ministry, which is such a gift. And I don't think I would ever have told you that maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I don't think I would have explained this season of stillness as a gift, but I am so thankful the Lord, and you can read it in the book. The Lord has taught me so much about not striving or hustling anymore and becoming too busy, but actually just being receptive to the season that he has me. And so it's really a season of rest. But I would say a typical day is just a lot of time with my boys. It's working during nap times. It's also having help from the people in my life. Like if you're looking at any mom that does something and you think, I mean, obviously moms are super, super women, but like leaning on the help in your life is what really gets us through, right? And so calling on that community, not being ashamed to do that. It's really, I mean, it's a lot of time with my boys. It's a lot of working within the margins, which is kind of what you have to do. And I think it's a good reminder because you can look at a lot of people's lives on social media, or you can just try to compare and think, oh, well, she has all this time, or, she has all this help and I don't have all this help, or whatever it looks like. But I also want to remind you that, like, for me, if I were to compare my life to you with the age of your sons or the season of your life, or even if I were to compare my life to a mom that has kids in school, you can't compare because it's just so vastly different. And so I just have to remind myself of that as well. And maybe someone needs to hear that too, that we're all in just different walks of life and it's so different and there's grace for all of it, you know? So I know that was kind of a runaround answer, but just, I don't know. I'm really thankful for this season of rest.
Yeah, and rest is a relative term too, because you're still a mom and
Yeah. Yeah.
so with a
Yeah.
9-month-old.
Yes, yes. Well, and I even talk about that in the book too. We talk about like, what does it actually look like to rest? What does it look like to not live? So there's a chapter that talks about like walking at Jesus's speed. What does it look like to still do the work that God has for us, but not be so stubborn about the Sabbath, not being so stubborn about, you know, doing all the things, but actually remembering that rest isn't just good for your body, it's good for your soul. And actually resting and reconnecting with the Lord gives you a better output because you're more dependent, because you're more filled up. Like I've learned that. And I think, I mean, this is my experience. Once you get a taste and once you learn, you know, what God has for you in rest and in Sabbath and in regular rhythms, right? Instead of more dead sprints, burn out, more dead sprints, burn out, you actually want more of it and you can't get enough. And I feel like I'm in that season right now and it's a blessing. But I don't think I've ever lived this way before. Like it's a new thing for me and I love it.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, because we all need those rhythms and to honor how God has made us and what He's given us at this time in life. Yeah, and I'm so grateful when my boys were in school, that's when I started going back to work part-time. And so I had this kind of these rhythms that really helped me survive, but also enjoy and be present. And when they were little toddlers, I was happy to get 15 minutes in the Word.
Right? Yeah. You gotta be flexible. And I keep calling on the chapters, but there is a part where we talk about like even just the practicalness of all of this. And at the end of every chapter in Overbooked and Overwhelmed, there's some practical, like how do we actually take the word and apply it? And something that I encourage people is like, hey, like redefine what it looks like to have your quiet time. And like, don't feel like the Lord has to be, or don't shove the Lord in Bible time in a little box where like you have to stay here at 7 a.m. in the morning and I'll never open the box up again and see you. I think it opens up such a like a fullness and a beautiful flavor of the Lord when you realize that you can pray at any point of the day. You can listen to her Bible at any point of the day. You can be discipling your kids at the kitchen table and you can be, you know, like worship music. You can get in the word before bed. It doesn't have to be like, I think it's wonderful. And that is how we keep up with God. That is how we spend our lives with Him by not just saying, you know, my quiet time is just one part of the day. And that's just one part of me. And the rest of the day, I'm going to go on without Him. Like, and that's just kind of like shaped me in a wonderful way because I just realized that I get, even if it's little bits of Jesus, I get Him throughout my whole day, you know?
Yeah, and I love that creativity that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that reminds me how music was so important to me at that time.
Yeah.
Because that's what I could listen to, you know.
Right.
And really would, if I was feeling down, would really bring me up and encourage me.
I love that.
So, yeah. Well, that's the questions that I have, Tara. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to share that I didn't think of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful. I have been so challenged with this message of overbooked and overwhelmed. And I love the way that I say this to people all the time, that the Lord takes a message like a book like this, and you can tell that the Lord is having His way with it when it does things that you could never imagine. And the timing of all of it, I think I'm seeing this book release. I'm seeing a lot of stuff that has happened in the world, not just, you know, in our nation, but outside of our nation, in politics, in homes, revivals happening. I just see a generation of people that actually spans across generations as well, but just people that are just tired. They're just really tired. And we're also walking into the fall, into holidays. Maybe you're listening to this and you're getting ready for everything to ramp up and you're just feeling the weight of it all. And you think, well, this is just the way it is, right? Like, we live in 2025. This is how life is. I kind of just have to grind and hustle until I die. But this book is a gentle and loving and practical callback to be like, hey, that's just not the life that God has given you. When he said John 10:10, the abundant life, he did not say the overcommitted life. He said the abundant life, abundant of his presence, his purpose, his peace, not abundant necessarily of so many things, because if we relied on a packed calendar to give us purpose, then what happens when everything comes crashing down? But we're actually given the abundance of Jesus no matter what to sustain us. And I love his timing. And I think this is a timeless book, but I also just love that it's reaching a lot of us in a season, and also just a time in our world that we really need like refreshment.
Yes, that's so true. And we need encouragement, and we need to remember that he calls us to rest. And, he says his yoke is easy. And I know I used this word before, but we get driven, and that's not healthy for us. But, surrendering to him every day, and enjoying his purpose, his rest, his direction, like as our shepherd.
So good. Yeah, love that.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much, Tara. This has been fun just to hear how God is speaking to you and to have you encourage us. So, thank you so much for being on the Her Story and just sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I always love having these conversations. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so where can people find your book? On Amazon, I guess,
Yeah. Everywhere books are sold, you can find Overbooked and Overwhelmed, and also my first book, Surrender Your Story, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Christian Book. It is also in select Walmarts across the nation, which is really fun. So go check your local Walmart. But yeah, I would be so grateful if you picked up a copy. I would love to hear how the Lord is using it in your life.
Yes. And we would love it too if you listen to her Bible to continue to build what Tara is talking about, build that quality time with the Lord. And you can find that at her.bible. So thank you for joining us, and hope you have a great day.